The Korea launch of the 2023-2024 Human Development Report is taking place this week. And the gist of the report is a growing gridlock from uneven development progress that needs to be addressed through multilateralism despite pernicious polarization. Accordingly, on Issues and Insiders today, we speak with the lead author of this latest report. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. The Human Development Report is an independent assessment commissioned by the United Nations Development Programme that places people at the centre of the process forward. For more on the latest report, I have Pedro Conceição Director of the Human Development Report Office here in the studio. Mr. Conceição, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. Well, then let's begin off Mr. Conceição, with a few words about the Human Development Report Office, including its mission.
Well, as you mentioned, the Human Development Report Office is part of the United Nations Development Programme. So the overarching mission is to advance human development. That means giving people the opportunities, the choices, the freedoms to essentially live lives to their full potential. In the context of our office, we do that by undertaking research, writing, advocacy that takes its expression in part in the Human Development Report that we're launching in Seoul tomorrow. But also in producing data, indicators that enable people to assess the extent to which we're making progress on human development. For example, using the Human Development Index. So it's a set of metrics that we make available to enable an assessment of the extent to which progress is occurring in human development, but also to give a way of evaluating policies and make an assessment as to the extent to which they are advancing human development or not.
Right. And before we touch upon the index for South Korea, you are here at the moment to partake in the Korea launch of the latest Human Development Report, as you just mentioned earlier. What would you say is the significance of the Seoul launch?
Well, I think that the Seoul launch and other national launches is what the report is all about, ultimately, because the report is global, so it speaks to broad trends that we try to capture in the report. But ultimately, the impact of our work has to do with the way in which it is interpreted in different national contexts by different communities. So the Seoul launch is all it is about, frankly. It's about making sure that the report informs debates, policies, discussions in different national contexts. And given the topic of this report, I think it's going to resonate a lot with the situation in Korea and in the broader region.
And speaking about the content of that report, Mr. Conceição, what would you say are some of the key findings of this latest report?
Well, the background for the findings are informed by what's happening to the Global Human Development Index, which is this aggregate indicator that brings together standards of living as well as achievements in health and education. So what we've observed over the years since we started publishing the Human Development Index in 1990 is that there's been a steady improvement of the Global Human Development Index. So human development has been expanding. But in 2020 and 2021, for the first time, there was a decline in the Global Human Development Index that has rebounded a little bit in 2022 and 2023. That's the expectation, at least for 2023. But this recovery is uneven in the sense that the countries at the bottom of the Human Development Index increase their distance from the countries at the top of the Human Development Index. And this represents a reversal of a process of convergence between the countries at the bottom and at the top. In other words, there was a process of reducing inequalities across countries that was broken when we saw this decline in the Human Development Index. So this is very concerning. And the report suggests, the findings of the report indicate that part of the reasons why we are facing this context is that we did not manage interlinkages, interdependencies across countries in the best way. During COVID-19, it continues now with climate change. And as a result, we see these inequalities widening.
So would it be logical to assume that this particular decline in the year 2020 and 2021 was owing to the pandemic, largely?
Largely owing to the pandemic, but we use the pandemic as an example of what happens to the Human Development Index if we don't manage these shared challenges in which cannot be managed by one country on its own. They need to be managed collectively by countries cooperating with one another.
Right, I see. Mr. Conceição, according to the latest Human Development Report, South Korea's Human Development Index, you spoke about this matrix earlier on, this index stood at 0.929 as of the year 2022, ranking South Korea 19th out of 193 countries in terms of, as you mentioned earlier, health, education, and standard of living. What does this ranking tell us about the country, and how does it compare to its past rankings?
It's the highest ranking that the Republic of Korea has ever had. It's now in the top 20. In fact, doing better than the 20th level. It represents or signifies the big improvement that the country has made on standards of living, but also on health and education, so the three indicators that we use to measure the Human Development Index. And in fact, the Republic of Korea was one of the few countries that did not suffer a decline in the Human Development Index in 2020 and 2021. I mentioned that the global average declined, and over 90% of countries around the world have also witnessed a decline in 2020 and 2021. The Republic of Korea did not. In fact, the only decline in the Human Development Index in the Republic of Korea happened in 1998, in the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis. So the ranking represents very rapid and steady progress in human development in the Republic of Korea. For instance, when it comes to health, a baby born in Korea today is expected to live over 84 years, which means that the baby will see well into the 22nd century. And this is one of the highest values of life expectancy at birth that exist in the world today.
What ranking did we start off with in our first Human Development Report for South Korea?
I don't know the value of the ranking, but it was much lower than it is today.
So our advances have been quite tangible and notable then?
Absolutely, both in absolute terms, but also in comparison with many other countries that did not improve as quickly as Korea did.
Right. Pundits have often praised Korea for its rapid economic advancements, especially from the ravages of war, so to speak. What do you believe made this particular transformation possible? And do you suppose Korea can better share its experiences with its counterparts across the world?
I think, Sunny, that it's more than the economy. So Korea did very well on the economy. The economy expanded very rapidly, with the exception perhaps of the context of the Asian financial crisis, as I mentioned. But what's remarkable about the progress of Korea is the way in which the gains from a larger economy were allocated. So they are allocated also in improving infrastructure, in improving health, in improving education, in expanding political rights. And I think this created a virtual cycle in which a more educated society, healthier society, contributed more to the economy generated more resources to continue to invest ultimately in human development. And from this virtual cycle then emerged technological innovation, the ability to invest in research and development, the ability to invest in the creative industries. So it's a remarkable story of the outcomes that a country can benefit from if it invests in human development. So that would be what I would take from the Korean experience that could be shared with other countries, is that investing in human development, so not only on the economy, but on this broader notion that has to do with the achievements in health and education, but ultimately about the ability of people, again, to live lives to their full potential, pays off in human development, in the economy, and in the opportunities that it generates for society.
Right, indeed. Mr. Conceição, speaking to a local media a while back, you spoke about concerns with regard to Korea's shortfalls in gender equality. Do you care to elaborate?
I would not characterize the performance of Korea when it comes to gender equality necessarily as shortfalls, because it has been making progress. I would say, though, that the progress that Korea has made on gender equality, moving towards gender equality, has not been commensurate with the speed of improvement that it has occurred on other dimensions of human development. And also hasn't been commensurate with the improvements that other countries that are peers of Korea have done. So earlier we mentioned that Korea has actually done much better than many other countries when it comes to economic growth, economic performance, achievements in health, education, technology. When it comes to gender equality, it hasn't done as well. So it has improved, but not as much as it could have done compared to the improvements in other areas, and could have done compared with other countries. So for example, when it comes to the pay gap between men and women, the average in OECD is that women earn 2/3 of what men do. In Korea, they only earn half. It's one of the lowest or one of the highest differences in pay between men and women. So I think there is room to improve on this dimension.
Right, and that being said, that here's the million-dollar question, Mr. Conceição. What practical policies do you propose to perhaps better tackle gender inequality here in Korea?
I think it's important to perhaps look beyond formal measures or the law, even though that is very important, and try to understand better perhaps the deeper determinants of barriers toward gender equality that may be reflected, for instance, on social norms that are not written anywhere, but they define, in a sense, what's the expected role for women in society. For instance, the role that women are expected to fulfill when it comes to care. And we have actually done some analysis in our office that tries to quantify these social norms that are biased against gender equality. And around the world, they are widespread. We found that up to 90% of the global population, so this is not only in Korea, but globally, 90% of the global population harbors a bias against gender equality. And this is equally shared between men and women. So it's not putting men against women at all. It's something that is widely shared in society. So I would look at what can be done, policies perhaps, that act and aim at addressing these biased norms against gender equality. For instance, ensuring that there is a more equitable distribution between men and women on care, or the way in which these socially expected roles for women are formed. Perhaps stereotypes emerge about what women should do compared to what men should do, boys should do compared to what girls should do. So acting perhaps on this would be one way of narrowing the gender gaps in the Republic of Korea. But our data on gender social norms provides information that could inform the debate. And because we can track also these social norms over time, would also enable us to assess whether the extent we're making progress or not.
Right, I see. Beyond national borders, Mr. Conceição, what are some of the pressing issues against human development in society today, do you think?
There are two things that worry us a lot. One has to do with what I mentioned earlier, the fact that after many years of convergence in standards of living, in human development, we are now seeing a widening of the gap between those at the very top and those at the very bottom. So this increase in inequalities, but it's a special kind of inequalities that those that are the most vulnerable and poorest of our international community, which already have low levels of human development, are being left further behind. This is happening not only across countries, but also within countries. And secondly, related to this, is the fact that what's driving in part this divergence has to do less with what countries on their own are responsible for, and more with the management of these shared, interlinked challenges. So COVID-19 was an example, but we can also think of climate change. So the way in which we, looking ahead, manage these shared challenges is one of the things that will enable us to either go back to a process where we see countries coming closer together when it comes to the Human Development Index, human development more broadly, or we risk continuing on a path of divergence.
Which is why you've highlighted the importance of multilateralism in trying to seek to better address these concerns then.
Precisely, because take a challenge like climate change. No matter how powerful or how committed a single country is to addressing climate change, these are challenges, or climate change is an example of the challenges that cannot be managed at the border. They require the engagement of the international community. They require the engagement of all countries. So the next pandemic will be a similar situation. So challenges in which countries depend on one another, be it because we share the single planet and live in a context in which the planet is changing very rapidly and no country on its own can manage, be it in the context of the digital transformation that's also connecting so many of our societies. We require to come together as an international community, and multilateralism is indispensable to enable us to move ahead in that direction.
And this is an impromptu question, Mr. Conceição, but keeping in mind the geopolitical tensions that we are facing in the world right now, do you envision multilateralism being productive in the near future?
It's already happening. Countries have many differences. They have divergent interests. They they compete economically. They compete on technology, and that's not going to go away. That will continue. But at the same time, countries recognize that when it comes particularly to climate change, they need to come together. We see countries like the United States and China, for instance, despite all their differences, coming together when it comes to climate change. So despite all the differences, this is not incompatible with the idea that countries will need to find ways, arenas, if you will, in which they need to cooperate. And it's happening, but not enough. It needs to be accelerated and expanded.
Right, I'd have to agree with you there on that front, because we have the AI Seoul Summit taking place as we speak, and participants are talking about the importance of working together to come up with guardrails for the safe use of AI. Mr. Conceição, perhaps we can end today's discussion with a few words about your plans as the director of the Human Rights Development Report Office, of course.
Absolutely, but let me also build on your point about the artificial intelligence, because this was another example in which countries came together in the General Assembly of the United Nations, and they agreed to pass a resolution also to establish general principles on these guardrails. So climate change, artificial intelligence, these are examples of areas in which countries are coming together. And looking ahead to address your question, we are going to explore the extent to which the digital transformation, artificial intelligence, can be harnessed to advance human development, because we are convinced that this is a make or break point in time in which we have the tools and have to make the decisions and choices that address the risks associated with these new technologies, and also harness the opportunities in a way that is actable across countries and also within countries.
All right. Well, best of luck in the future then,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Pedro Conceição. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. Be sure to join us again same time tomorrow.